For our second talk, which is Time Series Analysis 101, Tarun Abhichandani is going to take us the ride of time series. Tarun, if you are available, you can share your video and wave your hand.
Hi everyone.
Yeah. So Tarun is a data enthusiast working in the capacity of consultant with ThoughtWorks and as an application developer. He's currently exploring the data space with hands-on projects of data science and data engineering. He has developed a keen interest in time series analysis and real-time forecasting, and he would like to master the same and also make us a master with this talk. So Tarun, all over to you.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you, Balvinder, for the introduction. So without much delay, let's get started. So, so the agenda of this talk is to firstly understand what a time series is. How is it different from regular tabular data? What is time series forecasting? What are the different forecasting techniques used? What are ACF plots, PACF plots, stationarity, non-stationarity? And later we'll cover ARIMA's family of models, which includes the AR model, MA model, ARMA model, ARIMA, and SARIMA. So those of y'all who are already acquainted with machine learning, y'all know that time series is a different domain in machine learning. So we'll understand why is it a different domain. This is more of a technical talk to understand how to handle time series data, why to handle it separately, and how to handle it. So before we start, just a few disclaimers. The aim of this talk is to get you introduced to time series analysis and get into the details of ARIMA set of models. Although we will cover everything from the basics, like we'll go right up to the basics and start everything. But if you'll have a context of what a ML model is, it would be useful for you all. Everything is linked, like one thing leads to the other. Like the structure of this presentation is like we come up through a problem and then we solve it. So every slide is linked to the previous slide. So my request to you all is like stay connected with me for the next maybe 1 hour or so, and you all should be good to master time series analysis. And maybe if you all want to dig more deep into it, this is a really good start which you all can look up to. For simplicity, some concepts have been abstracted. So I've not got into the details of some concepts on purpose because that would kind of confuse the audience. And here we have a mixed set of audience of all kinds of people. So some concepts have been abstracted to explain them in a simpler way. So let's get started. What is a time series? Now, any data which is correlated with time is a time series. So what do I really mean by that? So on the screen, you can see the data of air passengers. So this is basically the data of air passengers traveling in an airline from maybe Jan 1949 to July 1960. So this kind of data is called a time series, wherein your target variable or the thing which you want to analyze, that is the number of air passengers traveling, is linked to a time period. If we look at the same data in a tabular format, it will look something like this. You'll have month in one column and the number of passengers in the second column. So such kind of data is called a time series data. The number of passengers is called the target variable because that's what I am interested in analyzing. So as an airline company, I might be interested in knowing what will be the number of passengers in the next few days. So such kind of analysis, such kind of data is called time series data. Now, this data which we look at on the screen is a univariate time series. What do I mean by that? Now, the number of passengers are dependent on only themselves. If you look at, so in 1949, the number of passengers is, on January 1949, the number of passengers is 112. If you look at February, it is 118. It is somewhat correlated to January, or it is somewhat derived from January. So this target variable is dependent on itself or the previous values of itself. So such a time series is called univariate time series. If we look at this data, now we have two more features. So these columns are called features. So we have two more features here. One is the ticket price and the second is the season. Now the number of passengers, along with being dependent on themselves, they are also dependent on the ticket price and the season, right? So such kind of time series, which is dependent on itself and a few other features of a few other columns, is called a multivariate time series. time series decomposition. Now, any time series is said to be divided into three main components. So first is the trend. So if we look at this data, so this is the same air passengers data which we had plotted earlier. So if you see, this has a continuously increasing trend. So if I remove this fluctuations from this and just try to plot the trend, it will be something like this. The second is the seasonality. Now in this time series, you can see that certain patterns are repeating themselves over a self of time over time. So just for example, this is the air passengers data set. Now we know December is a holiday season. So in December, the number of passengers are expected to rise. So such kind of repetition of pattern is called seasonality of a time series. So here you can see that this pattern is repeating every year. Now, in an ideal case, your trend and seasonality should make your time series, your whole time series. So look at it this way: trend plus seasonality is equal to your observed time series. But that's not the case generally. You also have some error which is introduced in your time series. In practical cases or in real world cases, you also have this error which is considered. So this error is called the residual. So for a time series, your trend plus seasonality plus residual is equal to your observed time series. Time series forecasting. So for example, look at the example wherein you have the price of a share till date and you want to know what will be the price of the share tomorrow. So you want to kind of predict what will be my price of a share tomorrow. So such problems are called time series forecasting problems. So here in this example, what we are trying to do is we are trying to predict what will be the number of air passengers after 1961. We have the data only till 1960. We are trying to predict it after 1961. So such problem statement is called time series forecasting. Examples of time series forecasting is forecasting the corn yield in tons by state each year, forecasting the closing price of a stock each day, forecasting the birth rate at all hospitals in a city each year, forecasting product sales for a company, forecasting the number of passengers, which we just saw, forecasting unemployment for a state, forecasting utilization demand on a server each hour, or forecasting the price of maybe petrol, gasoline in a city each day. So there are various examples and there are many examples of time series. Here are a few. Now, one thing that we should remember here, that time series forecasting is not a silver bullet. You cannot forecast anything. Needs to follow a certain pattern, a certain trend, or a certain seasonality for it to be forecasted correctly. So yeah, so to the crux of it is your time series analysis is not a silver bullet. You can forecast many things if they have a certain pattern repeating in them. Now, for those of y'all who are acquainted with machine learning, y'all might question, like, why do we don't use a machine learning algorithm on a time series? So let's look at this example. This is a traditional machine learning problem wherein you have four features: area, locality, age, and number of rooms of a house, and you're trying to predict the price of a house. Now, if you look at this example, each row is independent of each other. So even if I shuffle these rows, my algorithm would not get affected. I can use a linear regression model, logistic regression model, any model, but if I shuffle these rows, my target variable is not getting affected. I can put them in any order. Now, this is not the case with time series. Time series, the order has to be maintained. Your observation at Feb 1949 will be your observation at January 1949 plus or minus something. So every row is kind of linked to one another or is derived from one another. So this consideration is not taken by your traditional machine learning models. Hence, time series forecasting is treated as a separate domain altogether. Now, there are various forecasting techniques for time series forecasting. So first is the ARIMA set of models. It is a very famous tool which is used for time series forecasting. So we'll get into the details of ARIMA set of models in a while. The second is decomposition techniques. So we saw time series decomposition. Now that decomposition itself can be used for time series forecasting. So that those techniques come under decomposition techniques for forecasting. Second is interpolation. Suppose you have a linear time series, like something on the lines of y equal to mx plus c. You don't need a complex model like ARIMA for it. So for that, you can use a normal smoothing model or maybe if you have a polynomial kind of a time series, you all can use Holt winters or any kind of interpolation to forecast your time series. People nowadays have started using deep learning for time series. So this is a very evolving topic, and quite a few researchers also going on around this. So that's a booming topic. And we spoke about that machine learning techniques cannot be used for time series, but with a certain modification to your time series, you can also use machine learning techniques for forecasting. So as a part of this talk, we will be covering ARIMA set of models. So let's get started. So some terminologies before we start. So here we can see a time series. So T is the time. So T can be in hour, minutes, seconds, anything. So T is the time and Y of T is the observation at that time. So at T equal to 1, your Y of T is equal to 1. At T equal to 2, your Y of T is equal to 2, and so on. Now a feature which is derived from Y of T using past values of the time series is called lag features. So just look at an example. So Y of T minus 1 is nothing but Y of T. So Y of T minus 1 is an observation previous to Y of T. So if you look at this row, for T equal to 2, Y of T minus 2 will be Y of 1. Similarly, Y of T minus 2 will be two observations previous to your current row. So Y of T minus 2 will be two observations previous to your current row, which is 1. So these are derived features. So my original features was only Y of T, and I've derived a few features, Y of T minus 1 and Y of T minus 2. Now these features are called lag features. So we will need this when we actually understand ARIMA models. So that's why a quick introduction to what are lag features. So let's get into it. So ARIMA set of models is said to consist of three basic components. So one is the AR model, the second is the MA model, and the third is the integrated component. We will look at all of these three components in detail. Now ARIMA model is defined by something called PDQ. The P comes from AR model, the D comes from moving average model, and the Q comes from, the D comes from your integrated term and the Q comes from your moving average models. Now just stay with me and we'll get into each of these models in detail. Autoregressive model. Now let's start with the example. Now suppose your mom asks you to buy milk for the next 5 days for your home. So you don't know how much milk is required for your home. So you don't know how much to buy. So let's say you ask your mom and your mom tells you that on an average, 10 liters of milk should be required. So you say, okay, but it can be plus or minus something. So on average, she says 10 liters is required. So you say, okay, I'll use a model, which is something like this. Y of T is equal to 0.9 into Y of T minus 1 plus 0.1. So what you do is you go about it. So on the first day, you buy just 10 liters of milk. But you buy just 10 liters of milk. On the next day, what you do is you say Y of 2 is equal to 0.9 into Y of 1, which is 10, plus 0.1. You buy 9.1 liters of milk. On the third day, you buy 0.9 into Y of 2 plus 0.1. So you buy 8.929 liters of milk. So you're kind of trying to forecast how much milk will be required at my home. Now, this is not a very good forecasting. It is just I'm multiplying by some factor and adding some factor to it. So this is not a very good forecasting, but for the sake of understanding, let's just digest that you did this. And we'll get into why what you did was wrong. So this kind of a model, wherein your Y of T is dependent on some factor of your Y of T minus 1, is called an autoregressive model. It can also be dependent on Y of T minus 1 as well as Y of T minus 2. So yeah, this observation is currently dependent only on this observation. But your this observation can also be dependent on your this observation. So such models are called autoregressive models. Any time series is said to be dependent on its lag features with some error. So Y of T is equal to some constant into Y of T minus 1 plus some constant into Y of T minus 2 up to Y of T minus P plus some error factor. Now this error factor I didn't consider in the previous example for simplicity. This kind of a model wherein I say my model structure is Y of T is dependent on Y of T minus 1, Y of T minus 2 till Y of T minus P is called a classical ARP model. where P is the number of lag features my current observation is dependent on. P is a hyperparameter to this model. What do I mean by hyperparameter? This parameter has to be supplied from outside by the user to the model. Whereas C0 to CP are parameters which are estimated by the model itself. So now if we want to supply this parameter to our ARP model, like how can we do that? Like how do I know what should be the value of P? Now in this example, I made up this equation. So I can say the value of P is 1. But if you have a random data set, how do you know that what is the value of P? So for that, we have something called an autocorrelation plot. So what you do is to find out what is the value of P, you introduce lag features in your time series. So you introduce y of t minus 1, y of t minus 2, and y of t minus 3. Now, what you do is you calculate the correlation between y and y of t minus 1, y and y of t minus 2, y and y of t minus 3. So your correlation is something like this. Your correlation y of t minus 1 is 0.8. Your correlation with y of t minus 2 is 0.6, and your correlation y of t minus 3 is 0.4. Now, why does this make sense? Now, I want to know like how many previous observations is my current observation dependent on, right? So for that, I calculate the correlation between my current observation and my lag features, which is nothing but my previous observations. So if I try to plot these values, these correlated values on a plot, so the correlation is calculated using this formula. We'll not get into the details of that formula, but that's for reference. And if we try to plot the correlation of these lag features, I get a graph something like this. Now this is called an autocorrelation plot for a time series. Now, one thing which you might notice here is y is actually dependent on only y of t minus 1. Y of t minus 1 is dependent on y of t minus 2. And hence there's this correlation between y and y of t minus 2, right? So there's this indirect correlation on y of t minus 2, which is introduced due to y of t minus 1. Now, what if I want to eliminate that correlation? Now that correlation can be eliminated using something called a partial autocorrelation plot. So we'll not get into the details of how partial autocorrelation plot is calculated. We'll just consider that we calculate the partial autocorrelation of these lag features. Now you can see that y is dependent on y of t minus 1, but not much on y of t minus 1 and t minus 2 and t minus 3. Now if we plot this on a graph, we get something called a partial autocorrelation plot. The number of spikes in the partial autocorrelation plot tells me the number of lag features my current row is dependent on. So I get to know that my y here is dependent mostly on y of t minus 1. So in my AR model, I get to know that my value is dependent on only my previous value and not any values before that. So this is how we calculate the value of P. Now let's try this with an example. So I have RStudio here. So we load our air passengers dataset. Yeah, we load our air passengers dataset. So let's try to first plot this dataset. So yeah, this is my plot for my air passengers dataset. So this we saw in the graph. Now let's try to see what is the value of P. So sorry, let's try to plot a PACF to find out the value of P. So yeah, this is the autocorrelation plot, partial autocorrelation plot or PACF plot for my air passengers dataset. So we can see two spikes in the beginning, which says that the value of my P should be 2. So now, so this is the graph that we got. And from this, what we understood is that my value of P should be 2. So from a ARIMA, we know for my air passengers dataset, the value of P should be 2. Now let's look at moving average example, moving average models. Now this is very interesting. So it's the same example. That is assumption of 10 meters at home is E of t minus 1 is the error of your previous observation. So not your previous observation, but the error of your previous observation.
Folks, just give a moment. We are figuring this out. And Tarun is back. Tarun, looks like you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I got dropped off. So till where did you all follow? Actually, I lost the track.
Tarun, maybe if you can repeat from moving averages, this slide itself.
Sure. So yeah, sorry for the drop off. Yeah, so we looked at what AR models are. So let's look at what moving average models are. So let's consider the same example. You have to buy milk for your home for the next 5 days. On average, your consumption is 10 liters. You decide to use this kind of a model where y of t is equal to average plus 0.5 into e of t minus 1. Here you notice that I've not used y of t minus 1, but I've used e of t minus 1, which is the error of my previous observation. Now, what do I actually mean by that? Let's look at this example. So for the first day, you bring 10 liters of milk, but your actual consumption at your home is 8 liters. So you have introduced an error of 0.2. So the next day, what you do is you say that what I'll be doing is I'll bring average, which is 10 plus 0.5 into my error term. So 0.5 into minus 2 is minus 1 and 10 minus 1 is 9. So next day I bring 9 liters of milk. So on that day, your actual consumption is actually 10 liters. So you have introduced an error of 1 liter that day. So what you do is you again calculate using your model, which is average 10 plus 0.5 into 1. So which is 10.5 liters. So we bring 10.5 liters. Now that day, the whole of 10.5 liters is consumed. So on the next day, what you do is you say y of t is equal to average 10 plus 0.5 into 0. Because there's no error in my previous observation. So I just bring 10 liters. Now that day, you're 2 liters short of milk. So you have an error of 2 liters. So similarly, on the last day, you bring 11 liters and you're short of, the actual consumption is 12 liters, you're short of 1 liter. Now, such kind of a model, wherein which is dependent on the error of my previous observations, is called a moving average model. If we try to plot the number of days and these forecasted values, you'll notice that my values are continuously moving across my average, which is 10. Hence, this model is called a moving average model. Now a disclaimer, there's also a concept of moving average to calculate trend. Now that and this are not linked. Both are very independent of each other. Now, for a moving average model, any time series is said to be dependent on the error of its lag terms. So y of t is equal to C0 plus C1 into E of t minus 1 plus C2 into E of t minus 2 plus Cp into E of t minus q. So as you can see, y of t is dependent on the error of my previous observations. Such a model is called an MAQ model, where Q is the number of error lag features my current model is dependent on. Just as we had P in our AR models, Q is a hyperparameter of a MA model. The value of Q is determined using an ACF plot. So we saw ACF and PACF plots previously. So the PACF plot, which was partial autocorrelation plot, was used to determine the value of Q, whereas the ACF plot, which we saw earlier, is used to determine the value of Q. Sorry, PACF for P and ACF for Q. Now let's look at an example of a moving average model. So this is a MA1 model. So if we look at the ACF plot for this, you can see a spike in the first observation because this is an MA1 model. So this is simulated data. Now let's try it with the air passengers example. Visible, right? Yeah. So let's try it. Yeah. Balwinder, am I audible, right?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you. Just confirming. So yeah, let's try it with the air passengers data set. So let's try to plot the ACF plot of my air passengers data set. So previously plotted the PACF plot. Currently now let's plot the ACF plot. Now if you look at the ACF plot, this looks weird. Now we wanted a graph something like this, wherein we wanted to see a spike to determine how many previous observations my current observation is dependent on. Now this graph doesn't tell me that. Now what is the problem here? Now if we try to plot our air passengers data set, and if we look at a moving average model, now a moving average model expects my data to revolve around the mean. If you look at my air passengers data set, it doesn't revolve around the mean. So if you look at the average between or the mean between 1950 to 1952, it is somewhere near 150. If you look at the mean after 1960, it is somewhere near 500. So it doesn't have a constant mean. So hence this graph is not right. So what do we do to this? So let's take a step back and get us introduced to something called a stationary. So both AR and MA models assume that a time series should be stationary. What do we mean by stationary? Is that it should have a constant mean, it should have constant variance and constant autocorrelation. Why so? We just saw in the previous example. So every model, every machine learning model has a few set of assumptions which they expect the data to follow. Just like a linear regression model will expect your data to be normally distributed, your target to be normally distributed. Now, your time series data also expects your your AR and MA model expect your time series to be stationary. Now, what do we mean by stationarity? Now, this was the definition of stationarity. It should have a constant mean, a constant variance, and constant autocorrelation. Look at the first graph. This has a constant mean. That means the mean is a flat line, and a constant variance because your data is varying between your blue bands. The second graph is has a constant variance because the blue bands are constant. Your data is varying between blue bands, but your mean is continuously increasing and then decreasing. So this is a non-stationary time series. If you look at the last graph, it has a constant mean, but not a constant variance. So only your first time series is your stationary time series. The other two are non-stationary time series. Now, what do I do to make my time series stationary? So what do I do to make this data stationary at least across the mean? So that brings us to a concept of differencing. So suppose you have y of t and y of t minus 1. So what I do is I calculate another feature, which is y of t minus y of t minus 1. So I just subtract these two features. So basically I'm calculating the increase or decrease in my time series. So such features are called y dash of t. Okay. So differentiating is one way to convert your non-stationary time series into a stationary time series. Okay, so your y dash of t is equal to y of t minus y of t minus 1. Such kind of differencing is called first order differencing. If I go a step ahead and use these features to do a differencing further, so y double dash of t is equal to y dash of t minus y dash of t minus 1. So this is called second order differencing. Now let's just not worry about this second order differencing and let's concentrate on the first order differencing. So this is a time series which continuously has an increasing trend. Now if you difference this time series, then you can see that the mean is constant. So in the first time series, your mean is not constant. Once you difference that, your mean becomes constant. Now let's try it with an example here. So what we'll do is we'll plot the difference of a time series. So diff is a function which is used to differentiate a time series. So we'll say lag is equal to 1 because this first order differencing. Now if you see, now my mean is constant. Now if I try to plot my ACF plot okay, I just did plot of ACF. So yeah. Now if I try to plot my ACF plot, this is the output. Now this kind of makes sense. So from this I get to know that my value of Q is 2. And we did first order differencing to make this time series a stationary time series. Hence my value of D is 1. We'll get into this D part a bit later. Just for now, keep in mind that we did a first order differencing to make my time series stationary. Now there's also this spike which we see here, which cannot be ignored because it's significant. Now we'll look at how to handle this spike also later. For now, we know that the value of P is 2 and Q is 2. Now, this is what a MA model looks like. Now, if we try to combine my previously AR and MA model, we get something called ARMA models, AR-MA models, which is nothing but your AR part, which is the first part, plus your MA part. This is a classical AR-MA model where P and Q are hyperparameters, and your C, everything starting from C are parameters which are estimated by the model themselves. Now, what are ARIMA models? So we are talking so much about ARIMA. So what are ARIMA models? Now, one option is you make your time series stationary, you difference your time series and then feed it to your AR-MA models, or you let ARIMA take care about this. So the I is the integrated term, which signifies that ARIMA also takes care of making your time series model stationary using differencing. So a ARIMA model is defined as something called PDQ, where P comes from your AR model, Q comes from your MA model, and your D is the differencing factor, which we saw earlier. We did a first order differencing. Hence your D was 1. Now let's try to actually forecast our air passengers dataset using our ARIMA set of models. So first let's look at the help of ARIMA here. So if you notice here, so ARIMA takes in my time series X and I have to provide it with an order of 3 parameters. Now these 3 parameters are nothing but PDQ for a ARIMA set of models. We know our values of PDQ. So let's try and go ahead and build a model. Model is equal to ARIMA, which is equal to my time series air passengers dataset, and my order, which is P is 2, Q is 2, and my D is 1. Sorry, P, D, Q. P is Q, D is 1, and Q is again 2. So this my model is built. Now let me forecast using this model. So plot. So we use a library called forecast here. So so now we are sorry, just a minute. So yeah, so we are trying to forecast using our model, and we want to forecast 10 observations, and we also want to plot this on a graph. So let's do that. Okay, the spelling is wrong. Yeah. So let's do that. So this is my forecast. Now, as you can see, it's not a very good forecast. Now let's look at why my forecasting is so bad here. So the value of PDQ was 2, 2, 1. Now there was this spike which we had ignored earlier, and this was not taken into consideration for my forecast, and hence my forecast was not very good. Now, what does this spike actually signify? It signifies that my current observation, along with being dependent on my previous observation, it is also dependent on my last so let's look at our example actually. So this example, this is a monthly data. So my current observation in Jan would be dependent on my observation in the previous year in Jan. So 12 observation past my current observation, my current observation will be dependent on 12 observations before itself. So this is signified here, like my y of t is dependent on my t minus 12 as well as y t minus 1. So let's see how we can handle that. Now this information was never captured by ARMA or ARIMA set of models. So for that we have a different set of models which is seasonal ARIMA. So let's look at what is that. So for that, let's define something called a seasonal period. Now this time series seems to be repeating itself after a certain period of time. Now what is that period of time? So here we can see it's monthly data which is repeated each year. Hence, here we can say that my seasonal period is 12. So after every 12 observations, my time series is repeating itself. So that brings us to a new concept called seasonal differencing, which basically means, like, firstly we calculated the differencing y dash of t is equal to y of t minus 1. Instead of y of t minus 1, we use y of t minus 12 here. So your seasonal order here is, so your seasonal order here is 1. So after every one seasonal period, you're differencing your time series. Although here we write 12, but when we feed it to the model, we feed it as 1 because it is first order seasonal differencing. So after one seasonal period, you're trying to difference your model. Now let's try it now. So we'll be plotting the same ACF plot, but with also seasonal differencing. So along with your lag differencing, we'll also tell it to take a lag of 12 observations. Sorry. Sorry, this should be, this message should be 1 here and the lag. Yeah. So now if you notice this plot, my spike at t of t minus 12 is gone. So what we got to know is my y p is equal to 2, q is equal to 2, d is equal to 1, and my seasonal differencing factor, which let's call it as capital D, is equal to 1. Now, which brings us to something called a seasonal AR model. Now we saw earlier that y of t was dependent on y of t minus 1 and y of t minus 2. Now, what if I multiply that t minus 1 and t minus 2 by my seasonal period? So what that means is your y of t is dependent on y of t minus 12 and y of t minus 24. So it is my observation in December is dependent on my observation in the previous December and in the observation previous to that December. So such a model is called a seasonal AR model because we are multiplying every t minus 1, t minus 2 by my seasonal period, which is 12. So, so it goes up to capital P. Now this capital P is my hyperparameter for my seasonal AR models. Similarly, for seasonal MA models, so this is the same thing. Y of t is dependent on E of t minus 12, E of t minus 24, and t minus q into 12. So the 12 is my seasonal period, and hence your q is your hyperparameter here of your seasonal MA models. Now we will not get into the details of seasonal AR and seasonal MA models. We have certain references in the end if you all want to get into the details. Now this gets us to something called SARIMA set of models, which is a combination of seasonal ARIMA, seasonal AR, seasonal MA, seasonal differencing, as well as your previous ARIMA models. So your SARIMA model is defined as SARIMA, this is SARIMA, or you can call it ARIMA also, ARIMA of PDQ and capital P, capital D, and capital Q, which is your differencing seasonal factors of your of the seasonal AR, seasonal MA, and seasonal differencing models. Now let's try it now. So what we'll do is we'll build the same ARIMA model, but we'll also give them a seasonal order. So my seasonal order for capital P and capital Q, for now let's consider 0, but we know it has a dependency on the capital value of capital D is 1. So let's give that and build a model. Now let's try to forecast using that model. Now you can see my forecasts are pretty accurate because the seasonal part, which was not previously considered by the model, is now being considered. So yeah, this is my forecast now. So that was about ARIMA set of models. for further reading, we have these few links which you might want to go through and learn more about time series analysis and time series forecasting. There were a few references which we had taken, and these were the links for that. And yeah, we are open to questions.
Thank you, Tarun. This was a great, insightful talk. There are few questions. If you can start looking at the question sheet.
Yeah, so there's one question. Can we separate time, day, month, year from the date time given the data and train a normal ML model? Yes, we can. So as like when we spoke about earlier, like we could use machine learning techniques to. So we spoke about earlier that we can use machine learning techniques for time series forecasting. So yeah, this is a way of doing it. So what you do is you introduce lag features and actually make each of your row independent of each other. Your rows in a time series are never independent of each other. But if you know that my current observation is dependent on my previous two observation. So you introduce few lag features and make those rows independent of each other. And then you can use the same machine learning model like a linear regression model for time series forecasting too. So yeah, that was one question. So I see another question on the chat. So the data was a hello world example, and this data set makes it apparent to see time series can be applied. In actual project, what checks are performed to see if time series is even possible or attempting or not wise. Okay, so one kind of check which generally we do in our projects is we kind of see if it actually follows any pattern. So it had certain trends, seasonality. There are certain hypothesis testing methods also used to check if the time series is actually stationary or even can be made stationary. So that is all. So these are a few checks which we perform on a time series before actually feeding it to the model. So just for example, like you have this corona situation going on. Now you can't really use a time series model to predict corona because the current situation is being changed every day. So for that, you have a different set of models which are used. The problem state. So yeah, does that answer the question? Okay, I'll take the next one. The problem statement containing forecast with respect to a time element can always be considered as a time series problem. More or less, yes. Every time you have a time feature in your data and it is dependent highly on your target variable, you should consider a time series forecasting model instead of a traditional machine learning model. You could also use deep learning networks which are which are highly used nowadays. But yeah, to start with, I think you should start with time series models. And one advantage with time series models gives you over machine learning, over deep learning is machine learning, you require a lot of data for your model to work correctly. Whereas in time series model, it works good with decent amount of data. I wouldn't say very less data, but decent amount of data. The time series models work pretty good. So yeah, if there are any more questions, please feel free to type them.
We will also be sharing the coordinates of all these speakers today. You could also find them on LinkedIn. So if you want a chat later, maybe you can use those coordinates.
We have a question.
So the same data pre-processing techniques can be applied to time series data as well. Okay, that's an interesting one. So yeah, so for pre-processing now, not directly because, okay. So for, if you look at maybe filling missing values, now filling missing values as a, so consider that some data from a time series is missing. So consider 132 was not there here. It was missing from your data. So if this was a traditional machine learning model, you would use different techniques like filling it with mean, median, or maybe even using something like mice algorithm to fill this value or do some kind of a regression. But for time series, it would make sense to take your previous observation and just forward fill it or backfill it in your current row. Now, why is that the case? Now consider the stock market example. So in your stock market, you have data till from Monday till Friday. Saturday, Sunday, you don't have any data. So those are missing values for you. Now you need to fill in those values for your model to work correctly. Now, if you fill in those with the average and your model and your data has an increasing trend, something like this, your average would be somewhere near 350, and you will be filling 350 in the Saturdays and Sundays of now, as well as 350 in the Saturdays and Sundays of 1949, just for example. So that wouldn't really make sense. Instead, you just backfill it and you fill the value of Friday on Saturday and Sunday. So yeah, you can use the same pre-processing techniques, but it would make sense to understand what your data is and use certain different techniques which suit time series problems. So, yeah.
Cool. I think we are on time, and I think I don't see any more new questions. As I was saying, if we'll be sharing the coordinates, and if any one of you have any questions, or if you want to connect with the speakers later, you can use the coordinates. We'll also be sharing the slide decks later. Regarding the recording, we'll have to understand that internally, if that is shareable, we'll share it outside as well. Thanks a lot, Tarun, Anjuman, and Pranesh. It has been a wonderful session. Got to know a lot, learn a lot, especially with this situation. I think this is a great initiative on keeping our learning going.
Just Balwinder, thank you, Balwinder. So just we have this last question, so we'll just take it up.
There is one more question, yeah.
So what's the forecasting accuracy of non-stationary time series data? So see, ARIMA set of model takes care for non-stationary data if you provide the differencing term correctly. So it's not that you cannot forecast non-stationary data. You can forecast non-stationary data, but that has to go through a certain step of pre-processing to make it stationary. Now, if ARIMA is capable of making it stationary, you can just use the D term. Otherwise, you can use something called differencing, seasonal differencing, second order differencing. Some people also take the log values of your time series to make it stationary. So there are various ways of making your time series data stationary. So yeah, you can, forecasting accuracy is good as long as you can make your data stationary. And there are various methods to do that. Yeah.
Cool. Waiting for a minute more. So just to check if we have any more questions. Meanwhile, on the chat, folks, I'm also sharing the links for feedback form for the second talk. I have already shared it for the first talk. If you guys need, I'll share it for the first talk as well again. Please do provide feedback. It would go in a long way in improving our talks and content for the future talks.